Early elections yield Kuwait's first ever female MPs. But with 3 elections in as many years, can a compromise between Western democracy and tribal society achieve stability and progress? And can Kuwait still be considered a role model for democracy in the Gulf? This is Inside Story. Welcome to the program. I'm Imran Gupta. Women have been voted into the Kuwaiti parliament for the first time. It's part of an overwhelming call for change by the people of Kuwait. These parliamentary elections were the third to be held in 3 years. A standoff between unelected cabinet members and other members of parliament has meant that economic reforms have been frozen. The disputes finally prompted the Emir to dissolve parliament and call an election. This time around, just 50% of the electorate turned out, much lower than in previous years. But those who did turn out voted very differently from prior elections. Islamists lost ground in favour of liberals, and Shia Muslims doubled their seats compared with their Sunni counterparts. Well, one of the most interesting developments has been the inclusion of women in this parliament. Out of 16 female candidates, the Kuwaitis have elected 4 women MPs. After failing twice during the last 2 elections, they finally managed to gain the trust of the Kuwaiti voters as their representatives in the National Assembly. Among the winners, the US-educated economist Rola Dashti, who advocates change in this male-dominated society.
And we're going to move the country forward in various issues of economic, jobs, education, health, curbing corruption, making our good governance. We're going to move forward, bringing solutions to the challenges that are confronting us.
Well, joining us now, all from Kuwait, are our guests. Firstly, Dr. Nasser al-Sane. He's a former member of the National Assembly. Also with us, Gregory Gause. He's a professor of political science at the University of Vermont and is currently on a Fulbright scholarship at the American University of Kuwait. And finally, Adnan al-Duleimi is the CEO of the Middle East and North Africa Economic Consultancy. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Mr. Duleimi, if I could start off with you, what would you say triggered this success?
Well, there's a lot of distrust and mistrust by the voters of Kuwait. The voters were very unhappy about the situation in Kuwait on the political front, on the economic front, on the social front. There's a lot of antagonism, if you will, towards the parliament and the government, both alike, from the people, because there was virtually gridlock in the society and nothing had been moving, and the people, I think, spoke overwhelmingly in terms of or in the direction of change, and the people want change in the right way, and I think we have seen in this parliament, or in this new parliament, that change is forthcoming. And really, it's a message from the people of Kuwait to the government, like I said, and to the parliament, that in the next phase there will be some kind of, let's say, questioning of both institutions, and we should see change, and we are very happy today that change has come.
Strong message of change from the people. Dr. Nasser al-Sane, would you agree with your counterpart, Mr. Duleimi, that the people have sent a strong message to the government?
Well, there is a message of change, but if we go to numbers, we normally change 40 to 50% of the faces in the parliament, and it's almost the same for this election. But what people are assuming, that since we have for the first time women MPs, that might introduce some new voices within the parliament to speak up on certain issues. We will see for sure. Political groups that and political MPs who used to be MPs in that parliament and question the Prime Minister and cause the confrontation between parliament and government. Most of them have won again. They are back. So we shouldn't give a lot of exaggeration on the change that took place. What would change, I guess, I assume, in what I think is when we see the formation of the cabinet, who is going to lead the executive branch of government to become a prime minister, who are going to be the team members, how they're going to deal with the parliament, then we can judge for such change.
Okay, let's bring in Mr. Ghosh.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, Dr. al-Sane.
Sure.
Gregory Ghosh,
Sure.
Dr. al-Sane is quite cautious in his approach at this moment in time. It's more or less a wait and see. There's been a lot of media fanfare about the fact that 4 women were elected as MPs. What will this mean? Will it have a practical impact on society?
I think it's a long-term impact. It's a historic day for women in Kuwait and for women's political participation. But Dr. Nasser is absolutely right that the people who confronted the government in the last parliament and who led to the early dissolution and the early elections, they've also been returned to parliament. And so it will be difficult for me it's difficult for me to see how 4 new members of parliament who happen to be women will change that political balance all that much.
Yeah, it seems as if the former prime minister has been reassigned to create the cabinet himself. So from that point of view, Gregory Ghosh, it seems as if nothing is changing and that whatever the changes are, they're just merely cosmetic.
Well, I don't know if they're cosmetic. A lot will depend if in fact, Sheikh Nasser Mohammed is going to be the new prime minister. He'll have to decide how to deal with this new parliament. In the past parliament, he refused to put himself forward for votes of confidence, and that's what led to the early dissolution. If he's willing to go in front of the parliament on a vote of confidence, if the opposition members raise it, and he can win a majority, then his government can probably last for a whole 4-year term. But if he's not willing to do that, we're looking at another confrontation again.
al-Duleimi, what's the message from Kuwait to the rest of the Gulf nations by this election?
Well, I think the message is very clear. There's hope and there's ambition now with this new parliament, especially with the introduction of the 4 ladies into the parliament in a sweeping victory, in my opinion, in the parliament. And this change really, it seems that it has caused drastic and grassroots change amongst the other parties as well. And really, I don't speak here in political terms because I'm not specialist in politics, but I can see that there is a major change on the economic level, and I think this is a vote of confidence on the economic stimulus plan which has been introduced recently. So the message, I believe, is Kuwait now has to assert itself and get back to its role in the GCC, for example, and in the region, and really come back to its rightful position, because what happened in the previous parliaments and for the past few years really has been very unfortunate in Kuwait, that nothing has been moving, and the people really did not like the infighting between the parties and between the government, and the people, just the people, want to have Kuwait as again as it used to be.
Mr. Duleimi, sorry to interrupt you. Just before we get carried away and looking at all these successes, for a second, if we could look at the big picture. According to The Economist magazine's Democracy Index, every single Gulf state, including Kuwait, are, quote, authoritarian regimes. Doesn't that signify that there's still a long, long way to go?
Well, of course, there is still a long way to go, but the Kuwaiti model for 3.5 centuries has been working, and there is no other model that can work for Kuwait except this constitutional democracy, if you will. Of course, we don't speak in the Western style of democracy, no question about that. But this democracy is fit for the Kuwaiti society. Now, I mean, you can see that there is change in the nationalistic movement in Kuwait. There is, for example, if you take, and allow me to speak in this terms, if you take the Shiite parties, for example, now they are called what some people call them the Kuwaiti Shias rather than the Shia Kuwaitis. And there's a major distinction here, that this message of change speaks that we want Kuwait as a national entity rather than serving the interest of individual parties. And that's why I'm really optimistic, and this message will hit home. And as we can see, millions of people and many countries, not only in the region but internationally, have been following Kuwait and the success of the Kuwaiti parliament despite all the failures and the setbacks that have taken place over the years.
Dr. Nasser al-Sane, is it correct to fear or to expect some sort of friction between Sunni and Shia in Kuwait, given that the Sunni majority seems to have lost ground in these elections?
Well, we shouldn't give more, pressure on such scenery. I guess, yes, there are two frictions in Kuwait, Sunnis and Shias, but they are always successful in working together. Now, in this last election, maybe our colleague citizens, Shias, have gained more seats. That's fine. That's the election, and this group or political group will gain more, will gain less, and so on. And this is a process. It's the vitality of the Kuwaiti politics. But what I would hope is to see what is going to happen, because Sheikh Nasser, the ex-prime minister and the still current prime minister, has headed such cabinet for 5 times. He's been asked to form a cabinet. And he were not able, as you earlier mentioned, our colleague on this discussion mentioned that he was not able to face the grilling in the parliament. Now, if he is to be asked to form the new cabinet, whether he'll be able to deal differently with the parliament, we are not sure. Whether somebody else will be asked to head the cabinet and work ahead. I mean, all the components for Kuwait's stability and economic performance are there. It's a management problem on the, I would say, a political management between parliament and government. Now, parliament is remaining almost the same, including this election. It has changed, same as the election of last year, except some female MPs who are proud that female they did not come through quota as others. They came through the same, voters of men, which is good. So people are not only voting for women, but they are voting for a capable woman who will be able to produce something on the parliament. Right. A part of that, it's the relation that we are going to face in 2 weeks' time. I mean, in 2 days or 3, we will know for sure who is going to be asked to form the cabinet, who's the new prime minister. And in 2 weeks' time, we will see the new cabinet, and then then we will start to see how they're going to act together.
Let's bring in Gregory Gause. Mr. Gause, what's the next step for Islamists like the Muslim Brotherhood? Would they have to seriously modify their platform, given that they didn't do too well in these elections?
I think the interesting thing about these elections is that nobody who ran on a party platform, parties are illegal in Kuwait, but there are political groupings that are practically political parties. The candidates who ran on party platforms did not do well, and that's across the board. Liberals, Islamists, Salafis, Muslim Brotherhood, even in the Shia community, people who were on formal tickets didn't do as well as people who were independent. All of the women who won, ran as independents. And it seems to me that the interesting thing that all the political groupings, liberal, Islamist, Sunni, Shia, have to ask themselves in Kuwait is, why is it that Kuwaitis don't seem to like political groupings, formal political groupings, and seem to vote more for independent candidates?
Now, when a country is forced to call for 3 elections in less than 3 years, is there a problem with the system? And are elections treating the real issue or just the symptoms? Well, Kuwait has been ruled by the Sabah family for about 250 years. They do not hold elected seats in parliament, but they do occupy key cabinet posts such as Prime Minister, Defence, Interior and Foreign Affairs Ministers. Constitutionally, the people of Kuwait have been given the right to question the performance of the government. This public grilling process is seen by many as too humiliating for a senior member of the ruling family. A possible solution around the issue is to install a cabinet without members of the ruling family. Alternatively, the Emir could appoint the Crown Prince as Prime Minister. As questioning him could be difficult, it could give the impression of a more steady government. Mr. Duleimi, given that the Emir had to dissolve Parliament 3 times in the past 3 years, what guarantee is there that it won't be 4 times in 4 years?
No, there is no guarantee. Actually, there was a lot of talk that this Parliament is going to be short-lived. It's not going to live for a very long time, and I don't know whether this was talk of propaganda to instill some kind of fear in the society, or whether it is warranted. To be frank, I believe there is no other system of governance in Kuwait that is capable of running the country and ruling the country except this parliamentary system. And I believe this parliament is going to live for a while, at least until, if, for example, this what's called the gridlock or the deadlock MPs, for example, as some people might like to call them, the deadlock MPs again come back and create harassment and problems to the government. I don't think we should put the problem squarely on the government solely. I think the parliament takes a large share of the burden, and this change, I'm really hoping that this change will change the status quo, and the status quo clearly is not acceptable from the people of Kuwait, and like I said, people have asked for change and they want to change, and overwhelmingly change has happened whether we want to recognize it or not.
Dr. Nasser al-Sane, compare the Kuwait invaded by Saddam Hussein in 1990 with the Kuwait of today for us.
Well, when Kuwait was invaded in 1990, you must remember that Kuwait's parliament was not there. It was already dissolved. The people were in a conflict with the government and with the ruling family, we have to remember. But today we are united and the constitution is applied fully. Since that occupation 1990, we decided after Kuwait was freed in 1991 that everybody will have to stick to the constitution. That was a very important agreement that took place during the occupation of Kuwait when we were in Jeddah. So I think it's totally different. Kuwait now is a constitutional system. Anybody talks about avoiding or working outside the constitution will always be faced by opposition, by people. When there are some official hints a couple of weeks ago that the parliament might be dissolved against the constitution, which means for 1 year or 2 years, which the constitution only allows 60 days, there was a huge opposition. People did not like the parliament. It was not so popular, but they like the constitution. They are around it. So I think Kuwait now is different. But economically, I think now Kuwait is losing a lot of opportunities. And the reason for that is because the last performance of the 3 years of the government performance was so poor in economy. They always blame parliament that opposing and trying to interfere in their duties. But when you go to the track record, you don't see anything was done. So the parliament will confront.
Well, let's pose that to Mr.
It's a question
Duleimi.
of initiative.
Okay.
Initiative, style that we need. A new way of conducting business on the government
Okay, let's
side.
pose that to Mr. Duleimi. Has it been a sequence of lost economic opportunities over the past few years, as Dr. al-Sane mentions?
I think I agree with this totally, with this assessment totally. But again, what can we do if the political system has been virtually gridlocked for many years, and people like to point fingers and put the blame on one side over the other. But I think the right way again is for the constitutional process or system to take its due course. And if there is a dissolution of government and dissolution of parliament every once in a while, then nothing is going to move. Of course, this has been affecting even the image of Kuwait and the reputation of Kuwait. And I think the Emir himself, when he dissolved parliament, I think he took this issue into consideration, the image and reputation of Kuwait on the world stage, and that he moved under emergency powers to dissolve the parliament and again give another chance for the people to take a hard look at the situation. Now, like I said, I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic, and I hope change will put new realities on the ground. Again, I hope the message will hit home as far as the deadlock, as some people like to call them, MPs, that the status quo, the way things are being conducted currently, are not going to be working with the people of Kuwait. The people of Kuwait are fed up. They are sick and tired, if you will, of the status quo, and they want change.
Mr. Ghoz, if you had to define the foreign policy of Kuwait and its global outlook, how would you define it? And do you expect this particular election to influence that or change that?
Well, since 1991, Kuwait's foreign policy has been very, very close association with the United States. I was surprised watching the campaign in Kuwait that foreign policy wasn't an issue at all. I never heard it mentioned in any of the rallies or speeches I went to. I never saw it mentioned in the campaign literature that candidates gave out. It seems to me that foreign policy is something that is off the table in many respects in terms of Kuwaiti politics. I think it's largely because there's a consensus post the Iraqi invasion that Kuwait needs a strong outside power ally, and right now that's the United States. It seems to me that there's really no substantial opposition to that foreign policy line in Kuwait right now.
Dr. Nasser al-Sane, there's only about a minute left on the program. Why wasn't foreign policy an issue in these elections?
Well, you got the United States election before September 11th. That foreign policy was not an issue. But just because the soldiers of the United States are all around the world, people care for them. So we don't have soldiers around the world. Our foreign policy is stable. No questions about what our government is doing. So why should it take, any such discussion? I mean, Kuwaitis are more of busy with their domestic issues, and I hope that this election will bring us to a new era of a successful way of political management in Kuwait. So we'll give a good message to the neighboring countries and to the world.
Gentlemen, it's been intriguing hearing your thoughts. Dr. Nasser al-Sane, former member of the National Assembly, Gregory Ghoz, Professor of Political Science at the University of Vermont and currently on a Fulbright scholarship at the American University of Kuwait, and Adnan al-Duleimi, the CEO of the Middle East and North Africa Economic Consultancy. Thanks all of you for sharing your thoughts with us. It's been educational and fascinating. And thank you so much, the viewer, for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. As always, we welcome your comments, your suggestions, and even your questions. You can email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Bye-bye for now.